were no gunshots, no bombs falling, yet a real war is underway, silent, relentless, and dangerously cunning. Not on a battlefield, but among shipments of goods, inside cold steel containers packed with beef, wheat, or almonds. Instead of bullets and artillery, the weapons are tariffs, technical barriers, covert bans, and a deliberate silence. In this war, the United States, the country that once led the global agricultural supply chain, is slowly being pushed away from the world's dinner table, coldly and without a sound. Beijing moved first, not on the tech front, nor in the energy sector, but in the most unexpected place: beef. China, the biggest customer of American agriculture, quietly suspended over 150,000 tons of U.S. beef in just a few weeks, worth nearly $500 million. The reason given? Food safety concerns. But with the Trump administration having just tightened tariffs on Chinese EVs and semiconductors, no one really believed it was just a technical issue. This was a message and a warning. Beijing had found a critical weak spot and didn't hesitate to aim right at it: the American agricultural heartland, home to the voters who still hold the keys in every presidential election. In a world being reshaped by new power dynamics, food is no longer just something to eat. It's a strategic lever, a tool for reward and punishment, an ace card in a game where the rules are being rewritten. And as Russia quietly replaces America and China subtly restructures the supply web, it's the American farmers, people seemingly far removed from chips and EVs, who are turning out to be the direct casualties. So what exactly just happened to American beef? How did an industry once thought to be the safest get blindsided so suddenly and so ruthlessly? The answer begins on an ordinary night, but within just a few hours, nothing would ever be the same again. Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, names once spoken with pride on America's agricultural map, have now become the epicenter of a silent but fierce economic shock. Over $500 million worth of U.S. beef was suspended by China in just a few weeks, without warning, without negotiation. Shipments that had already set sail en route to port were suddenly ordered to turn back. Entire export plans unraveled at sea. Beijing gave a brief statement. The products did not meet sanitation standards, yet failed to provide a single specific metric. In small rural towns where a single returned container can freeze an entire processing chain, people no longer know what to believe. Farmers load up their trucks, unsure if they'll find a buyer. Companies shy away from signing long-term contracts, fearing a sudden ban. The domestic market is already saturated, and beef prices are plunging due to a surplus with nowhere to go. But the deeper pain lies in the sense of abandonment. There was no phone call from Beijing to explain, no negotiating effort from Washington to salvage the situation, just silence. And while America was still scrambling to understand what had just happened, someone else quietly stepped into the vacuum, methodically, deliberately, and with clear intent. On the other side of the globe, Russian cargo ships began docking in Chinese ports, bringing in fresh beef, clean, inspected, and approved under standards jointly agreed upon by Beijing and Moscow. No US dollars involved, no Western banks, no dependence on international oversight. A new network is taking shape, and this time, America no longer has a seat at the table. No fanfare in the press, no fiery speeches at summits, but Russia had been preparing for this moment for a long time. While the US remained entangled in political debates and tariff wars, Moscow quietly expanded the southern Siberian pastures, fast-tracked the modernization of industrial slaughterhouses, and most importantly, signed agreement after agreement with China, line by line, to ensure one thing: when America stumbled, Russia would be ready to take its place. Not temporarily, but for the long haul. Since 2023, the two nations had agreed to adopt a shared quarantine system, removing most of the technical barriers that once kept Russian beef out of premium markets like China. But that was only the first step. The bigger move was building their own dedicated transport corridor, a cold chain rail line spanning Asia, connecting cattle farms in Russia's Orenburg region to consumer hubs in western China. Russian goods now reach their destination in just a few days, cheaper and without reliance on seaports, ports that, for U.S. exports, are vulnerable to blockades and stringent inspections. And most crucially, none of it is done in U.S. dollars. Contracts are signed in yuan or rubles, with payments routed through a bilateral financial system established by China and Russia in mid-2024. no one can freeze the funds. No American bank has the right to know who's selling or who's buying. A new food economy is being built, one where Western financial rules have no place. In Moscow, the Russian government has announced an investment package worth over $1.1 billion to double its beef cattle population by 2027. Agribusinesses are being encouraged to meet Asia-friendly standards. They no longer need to comply with EU or USDA certifications, only China's approval matters. This is no longer simple exporting. It's food security strategy, tightly woven into geopolitical alignment. And for China, a partner like Russia, stable, undemanding of democracy and willing to share risk, is the perfect fit in an increasingly polarized world. So while Americans were still reeling from the shock of a sudden suspension, the Russians had already signed 5-year contracts, begun integrating breeding cattle into the new supply chain, and prepared to fill every gap left by Washington. This wasn't a temporary reaction. It was a systematic replacement, and the consequences are becoming clear. Across America's heartland, feedlots are overflowing with unsold beef. Processing plants are cutting capacity. Prices are in free fall. The very people who once took pride in feeding the world are now facing a tough question. If we can't sell to China, who else is left to buy? And if no one can answer that question, it won't just be the farmers who suffer. It'll be the entire American agricultural economy. From holding over 12% of China's imported beef market in 2022, the US has seen that share fall to less than half in just the first quarter of 2025. Not because of declining quality, not because of a beef shortage, but because politics has become the invisible chemical determining every import decision. Shipments once welcomed with open arms are now rejected at port with no explanation. Many American companies have been forced to write off entire orders as Chinese partners abruptly cancel contracts. No justification needed. They no longer have to explain. Russia, Brazil, even Kazakhstan are ready to take America's place. On Midwestern farms, where the hum of bulldozers and the rumble of trucks once filled the air, a strange silence has settled. Cattle that are ready for market still linger in their pens because no buyers are coming. Beef prices have dropped to their lowest levels in 8 years. Processors are pulling out of long-term contracts, unsure whether China will ever reopen the gates. Some plants have started rotating furloughs. Others have shut down temporarily as inventory costs spiral out of control. For them, the figures on trade reports are no longer just charts, they are a matter of survival. The damage has spilled beyond beef. Almonds, pork, corn, dairy, and sorghum, once pillars of U.S. agricultural exports, have all been slapped with tariffs between 10 and 15% by China. In March 2025 alone, the estimated damage to American agriculture topped $21 billion. But what unsettles people most is this. Beijing says nothing. No negotiations, no promises of lifting the measures, no backdoor channels offering hope. They're letting the market adjust itself in the way most favorable to their long-term strategy. And in that silence, something is slowly but surely unfolding. The US isn't just losing customers, it's losing its place in the entire structure of the global supply chain. Because China quietly but decisively is not just switching suppliers. It's rewriting the very system the world has grown used to for over 30 years. Brick by brick, the global trade system is being dismantled, not through conflict or official decrees, but through quiet bilateral deals, cargo ships rerouted from traditional ports, and long-term contracts no longer denominated in US dollars. China doesn't need to make grand declarations. It only needs to do one thing: stop buying from America and start buying from someone else. As long as that someone agrees to a new set of rules where Beijing is not merely the customer, but the one rewriting the rules of the game. After sealing its strategic handshake with China, Russia has gone beyond beef, expanding exports of wheat, peas, grains, and processed foods, directly targeting sectors once dominated by the West. Kazakhstan has emerged as a new supplier of animal feed. Brazil, through a yuan-based payment agreement, has swiftly filled the soybean gap. Pakistan has signed a 15-year agricultural partnership with built-in preferences for the Chinese market. These links are connecting piece by piece into what can only be called a purpose-built supply chain, not just economic, but fundamentally political. At the same time, China is pouring tens of billions of dollars into trans-Asian transport corridors, railways linking Russia, Kazakhstan, and China, highways connecting Myanmar, Laos, Thailand, and deep water ports in Pakistan. The goal is clear and unapologetic: reduce reliance on sea routes that can be controlled by the West, and secure the supply of food, energy, and raw materials under any global condition, even if the world fractures completely. No one's using the term deglobalization, but what's unfolding is a quiet filtering, where the world is splitting into distinct closed networks built on political trust rather than market prices. In that network, the US is increasingly left on the outside. Not because it can't produce, but because it no longer fits the political rhythm of the new Asia, where flexibility, an understanding of soft power, and the ability to adapt determine who gets to join and who ends up isolated. The leadership role that once helped America shape the 20th century is now fading amid new axes of alignment that no longer run through Washington or Wall Street. And as the map of global trade is redrawn line by line, the question looms: how will the US respond? Will it continue reacting with punitive tariffs, driven by frustration? Or will it craft a smarter strategy, humble enough to admit it's no longer the sole center, and agile enough to find a way to stay in a game it once started but no longer controls? America stands at a historic crossroads, not just in its role as a superpower, but in how it understands the very world it once helped design. Tariffs, seen as powerful tools of economic leverage, are now backfiring. No one fears trade punishment anymore. On the contrary, nations are actively seeking to break away from US-led systems, building their own trade networks, where the dollar is no longer a requirement, and Washington is no longer the gatekeeper for entry. If the US continues to act as though it still sits unchallenged at the peak of global power, it won't just become isolated. It will remove itself from the most critical negotiating tables of the 21st century. Because countries today don't choose partners based on dominance, but on trust, stability, and the ability to cooperate for the long haul. And if America wants to return to relevance, it must change its approach, not with threats, but with the ability to share and to listen. It must expand its market reach beyond traditional frameworks, turning towards Southeast Asia, Africa, and South America, regions that are becoming the new centers of global growth. It's unrealistic to expect China to change course, but the US can still find new allies, economies that need technology, infrastructure, and access to large consumer markets, all of which America can still offer. At the same time, Washington must reconsider rejoining multilateral trade blocs it once withdrew from due to misread political winds. The financial architecture must also evolve. A multipolar world cannot be sustained by the US dollar alone. America must work with other nations to create more flexible payment systems, better suited to today's geopolitical and technological realities, where politics and digital infrastructure now shape the flow of capital. No one is waiting for the US. The global machine keeps turning. It may be slower, but it's no longer dependent on a single axis. This is the moment for America to look inward with humility, to adjust and to adapt. Because in this new power game, the winner isn't the strongest, it's the one who knows how to change in time. Beef, once a proud symbol of America's agricultural might, is no longer just a meal on the table. It has become a weapon, not because the product itself has changed, but because the way the world sees it has. In this new era, food, energy, technology, and even the flow of money can all be used as tools to reward those who comply and to punish those who don't. And China, with its patient yet calculated strategy, has shown that it doesn't need war to reshape the global order. It only needs to change who it buys from. When Beijing turned its back on Washington and Moscow stepped in to take its place, what was lost wasn't just market share or export contracts. It was trust, the belief that the US remains an indispensable center of the global supply chain. And once that trust begins to slip, no matter how hard America tries to win it back, the path forward will no longer be as easy. Because other nations have now tasted what it feels like to have choices, and they won't give up that power lightly. What's remarkable is that none of this happened with fanfare. There were no dramatic announcements, no headline-grabbing summits. It all unfolded like an underground current, quiet but steady. And by the time we noticed, the map of economic power had already shifted by a few degrees. just enough to shape the next few decades. The story of beef is only a small slice, but it reveals something much bigger, that the world no longer runs solely on pure economic logic. Trade decisions today are shaped by geopolitics, by trust, by a country's flexibility and cooperation, and by its stance toward the emerging order. The old idea of fair trade no longer applies if the buyer doesn't need you anymore. And the most unsettling truth is this: the ones who once led the world may now be the last to adapt. We're living in an era where every bite of food, every drop of oil, every stream of data can be turned into a chess piece on the great board. No one stands outside that game. And you, the person listening to this right now, are a part of that supply chain no matter what your job is. Because the price of meat at the supermarket, the milk in your morning coffee, and the value of the money you earn, all are being shaped by unseen decisions made in boardrooms halfway across the world. If you think this perspective is one that more people should hear, leave a comment below. Do you believe America can adapt in time to the New World Order? How are Russia and China changing the rules of the game? And what path should Vietnam choose, positioned at the crossroads of competing powers? Don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss the deep dive analyses and crucial updates on a world that's shifting by the day. Because sometimes what seems like just a piece of beef might actually be the compass pointing us toward an entirely new era.